For most of the year the old god was bound. Not hidden, not forgotten, bound. In Rome the statue of Saturn stood with wool around its feet, a god restrained by thread, a god held in place. Then December came, and the bonds were loosened. The city changed. Work stopped, candles burned, dice rolled, small gifts passed from hand to hand. Masters served slaves. Slaves spoke more freely. For a short time the world turned upside down. This was Saturnalia, the festival of Saturn, a feast of release, reversal and temporary misrule. But the important word is temporary. The feast ended, the hierarchy returned, the god was bound again. That is the first shadow of Saturn. Not evil, not secrets. Limit, release, return. A door opened for a few days, then closed. Today Saturn appears in a very different kind of story. Black cubes, hexagons, clocks, banks, rings, old gods, elite rituals, time as prison, a hidden cult behind the visible world. Some call it Saturn worship, some call it the cult of Saturn, some call it the cult of the black cube. But before those claims can mean anything, we have to ask what Saturn was. A Roman god, a Greek titan, a planet, a festival, a force in astrology, a symbol in magic, a name attached to time, death, age, debt, memory and power. You are listening to Noir Frequency. Tonight we open the case file on cults of Saturn. This episode has to move carefully because Saturn is not one thing. The name carries layers. First there is Saturn the Roman god, associated with sowing seeds, agriculture, abundance and an imagined golden age, and the public life of Rome. Then there is Kronos, the Greek titan, the old ruler who overthrew his father and swallowed his own children to prevent them overthrowing him. Then there is Kronos, time, not originally the same figure as Kronos, but close enough in sound and image that later writers and artists blurred them together. Then there is the planet Saturn, slow, distant, cold, and the outermost of the classical planets visible to the ancient eye. In astrology it became associated with age, melancholy, severity, limits and delay. Then there is the occult Saturn, a sphere of correspondences, lead, blackness, Saturday, restriction, binding, old age, the grave, and the border between the known cosmos and what lies beyond. And finally there is modern Saturn, the one found in conspiracy videos, occult forums, social media threads, and symbolic breakdowns. Saturn as hidden power, Saturn as time prison, Saturn as black cube, Saturn as the god behind the clock. The question is not whether every layer is the same, they are not. The question is how they became connected, and why, when modern people look for hidden control, they so often find Saturn waiting there. Saturn's oldest Roman presence was public, civic and visible. His temple stood in the Roman Forum at the foot of the Capitoline Hill. This was not the edge of Rome, it was near the centre of Roman public life. The temple was sacred, but it was also practical. It housed the aerarium, the state treasury, where Rome kept public money and important records. That connection matters. Saturn was associated with agriculture and sowing seeds. A seed is wealth placed into time. It disappears into the ground, it waits. If the season turns correctly, it returns as a harvest. The treasury works in a similar symbolic register. Wealth is gathered, counted, stored, and held against the future. Records are kept so that memory can become law. Debt can be remembered. Obligation can survive the person who made it. So even before Saturn becomes time with a capital T, he already touches time. Not clocks, not calendars as we know them, but waiting, storage, return, obligation, and the future claiming what has been placed into it. This is where the cult of time begins to make sense as an image. Not because a Roman priest was secretly worshipping an hourglass, but because Saturn belongs to the old fear that everything planted, stored, promised or owed must one day come back. Saturnalia began on the 17th of December. In earlier tradition it was a single day. Later it expanded into a longer season of festivity. It was Saturn's great festival, and it changed the emotional weather of Rome. Work paused, schools closed, public business slowed. People feasted, gambled, gave gifts, lit candles, wore informal clothing, and greeted one another with cries of celebration. For a short time, social order loosened. Masters served slaves. Slaves could speak with unusual freedom. A household might choose a mock king of the feast. The rules were not abolished, they were inverted. This is important. Saturnalia was not a revolution, it was ritualized disorder, a controlled opening, a licensed breach. Rome allowed the world to turn upside down, then turned it back again. That pattern is deeply Saturnian. The god is bound, the god is released, the city is loosened, the feast begins, then the feast ends and the god is bound again. The point is not simply joy, it is the knowledge that joy has a boundary, misrule has a boundary, freedom has a boundary. Time itself grants the holiday, then takes it back. Saturn becomes darker when he is joined to Kronos. Kronos was not originally the same as Saturn. He was Greek, not Roman. A titan, not an agricultural god of the Roman Forum. But Roman religion often identified its gods with Greek ones, and Saturn became linked with Kronos. In Hesiod's Theogony, Kronos overthrows his father Uranus. He takes power, then hears that one of his own children will overthrow him, so he tries to stop the future. He swallows his children as they are born. The image is brutal because the logic is simple. The old ruler fears succession, the father fears the child, power fears replacement, the present devours the future to keep itself alive. This is not yet time, it is kingship, fear, inheritance, and the terror of being replaced. But the image is ready to become time, because time also devours its children. Everything born is eventually consumed by the years. Then comes the third name, Kronos, time. The word sounds like Kronos. The two were not originally identical, but later writers, artists, and thinkers blurred them together. Kronos was the devourer, who became Kronos the devourer. The titan who swallowed his children became time that swallowed all things. Now the sickle changes too. Saturn and Kronos carry a harvest tool, a curved blade for cutting grain. But as the figure becomes time, the harvest blade becomes the reaper's scythe. The god of sowing becomes the old man who cuts us down. This is not a single secret meaning buried unchanged from the beginning. It is a chain of transformations: god, titan, planet, time, death. Each layer makes the next one darker. Long after the public worship of Saturn had faded, Saturn remained in the sky. Saturday still carries his name, the day of Saturn, Dies Saturni. In traditional astrology, Saturn was slow, cold, dry, old, and distant. It was the outermost of the classical planets, the last visible wanderer before the fixed stars. Because of that, Saturn came to mean limit, the edge, the delay, the wait, the thing that says no. Astrological Saturn was associated with farmers, labourers, old men, prisoners, beggars, graveyards, scholars, and melancholics. Not because all those things are identical, but because they share a mood, hardness, age, solitude, burden, and the long pressure of time on the body and the mind. In the Renaissance, Marsilio Ficino developed one of the most influential visions of Saturnine melancholy. For Ficino, the scholar was especially vulnerable to Saturn. Deep study meant withdrawal. Withdrawal could become gloom. Gloom could become illness. But it could also become contemplation, a dangerous doorway into thought. This is one of the great tensions of Saturn. He limits, but limitation can focus. He darkens, but darkness can deepen. He isolates, but solitude can produce vision. He burdens, but burden can become structure. Saturn is not only death. He is the disciple before death, the slow pressure that shapes the thing it confines. In occult and esoteric traditions, Saturn becomes a system of correspondence. A correspondence is a symbolic link, a way of saying that a planet, a colour, a metal, a number, a day, a spirit, a plant, a stone, and a human condition all belong to the same pattern. For Saturn, the pattern is severe. Lead, black, Saturday, old age, melancholy, binding, silence, boundaries, the grave, and time. In texts of astral magic, such as the Picatrix, planetary rites are timed and structured. The day matters, the hour matters, the image matters, the material matters, the desired effect matters. This is not the same as ordinary worship in an ancient temple. It is a magical grammar, a way of arranging the world so that hidden sympathies can be used. If Saturn rules limitation, old age, separation, or binding, then Saturnine materials and timings are chosen for works that belong to those conditions. This is where the later occult imagination gives modern Saturn theories some of their raw material. The colour black, the material lead, the day Saturday, the feeling of binding, the idea of time as a force, the sense that Saturn sits at the cold border of the visible cosmos. None of this proves what modern Saturn theorists claim, but it explains why Saturn is available to them. The symbols are already dark, already structured, and already connected to restriction, age, death, authority, and hidden knowledge. Modern theory does not invent Saturn's shadow, it inherits it, then rearranges it. The black cube is where modern Saturn symbolism becomes most recognizable. To understand why, we need to separate three things: a cube, the color black, and Saturn. A cube is one of the simplest solid forms. It is stable, equal-sided, architectural, and buildable. Depending on context, it can suggest order, enclosure, foundation, prison, perfection, or weight. Black carries its own field of meaning: night, soil, death, mystery, authority, absence, and the unknown. Saturn in occult correspondence is also linked with blackness, heaviness, lead, binding, and limit. So when modern interpreters see black cubes, they do not always read them as neutral shapes. They read them through Saturn. That is the interpretive step. A black cube becomes Saturnian. A Saturnian cube becomes a clue. Enough clues become a pattern. A pattern becomes a claim, and a claim becomes a hidden cult. This does not tell us whether the theory is true, it tells us how the theory is built. And once you see the structure, you can follow it without being forced to accept or reject it too quickly. The Kaaba in Mecca is often pulled into this reading because it is visually treated as a black cube. But the Kaaba belongs to Islamic sacred history, pilgrimage, practice and theology. The Saturn interpretation is a later reading imposed from outside that tradition. Some see that as evidence of a preserved older current. Others see it as a visual association without historical support. Either way, it has to be handled carefully, because this kind of claim can easily slide into religious hostility, anti-Muslim conspiracy theory, or broader accusations against whole communities. The same care applies to Freemasonry. Masonic symbolism involves geometry, building tools, temple imagery, moral architecture, and ritual structure. Saturn theorists see geometry and hidden ritual, and then ask whether a Saturnian current is present. Mainstream historical accounts describe Freemasonry through fraternity, morality, biblical symbolism, enlightenment, sociability, and institutional development. The question is not whether symbols overlap. They do. The question is what kind of connection the overlap proves, if any. And then there is Saturn itself. The planet has a real hexagon at its north pole. NASA describes it as a long-lasting atmospheric pattern, a weather structure, a planetary phenomenon. For Saturn theorists, the hexagon becomes part of the cube argument. A hexagon can be drawn as a cube in perspective. A cube can be hidden in a hexagon. The planet appears to carry the sign of the symbol. Again, the listener has to decide what kind of connection this is. Astronomy, geometry, coincidence, symbolic resonance, or something more deliberate. So what would a cult of Saturn actually worship? Not necessarily a statue, not necessarily a planet, not necessarily a being with a name. It might worship what Saturn represents: time, limit, debt, authority, scarcity, the old devouring the young, and the future already claimed. This is where the conspiracy reading becomes emotionally powerful. Modern life already feels Saturnian. Calendars, clocks, deadlines, contracts, banks, interest, taxes, credit scores, and productivity targets. A human life measured, divided, and sold back to itself. If Saturn is the god of time and limitation, then the modern world does not need to hide him very well. He's in the timetable, the repayment plan, the shift pattern, the due date, the fear of being late, and the fear of running out. That does not prove a secret Saturn cult, but it explains why the idea feels plausible to some people. Because the world already behaves as if time is sacred, measured, monetized, obeyed and feared. Perhaps the cult of time is a hidden priesthood. Perhaps it is an interpretive myth built from symbols. Perhaps it is ordinary life under the clock. Perhaps those things are not as separate as they first appear. Let us look again, not to decide what every symbol means, but to see what the story carries. A Roman god of sowing, storage, and a lost golden age. A temple connected to treasury and records. A statue whose feet were bound, then loosened for the feast. A winter festival of candles, gifts, gambling, and temporary reversal. A Greek titan who swallowed his children to prevent the future from replacing him. A later fusion of Kronos and Kronos. A harvest sickle that became the blade of time. A cold planet of melancholy, contemplation, and limitation. An occult system of lead, blackness, Saturday, binding, and boundary. A modern theory that reads cubes, hexagons, rings, and clocks as signs of something hidden. None of these pieces are identical, but they speak to one another. That's what makes Saturn difficult. He is not one thing. He is a gathering for harvest and hunger, for gold and debt, for feasting and discipline, for age and authority, for the terror of time made visible. The modern conspiracy asks us to imagine a secret Saturn current moving behind the world. Maybe that current is real. Maybe it is symbolic. Maybe it is the internet discovering old correspondences and arranging them into a new myth. Maybe it is all of those things at once. What remains is this: Saturn was bound, Saturn was released, Saturn devoured, Saturn delayed, Saturn counted, and Saturn darkened. And whether he is hidden in temples, symbols, systems, or simply in the clock above the door, the old god still names something we recognize: the limit, the debt, the winter, the harvest, the fear that time is not passing around us, it is feeding. Saturn begins in the soil, seed and harvest, loss and return, the dream of an age before labour. Then Rome placed him near the treasury. Time became wealth, memory became law. The old god learned to keep accounts. Later he became the devourer, the planet, the melancholic star, the old man with the scythe, the patron of scholars, reapers, prisoners, magicians, and those who feel the weight of days. And now, in the glow of the screen, he becomes something else again: a cube, a theory, a hidden hand imagined behind the clock, or perhaps recognized. Maybe there is an ancient Saturn current still moving through the world. Maybe the black cube is only a shape until someone teaches it to speak. Maybe the true cult of time is quieter, older, and more ordinary. The daily ritual of waking, working, counting, owing, aging, remembering, and running out. You have been listening to Noir Frequency. If this story found you, there are a few small ways to help the signal travel further. Like the episode, share it with someone who knows the weight of time. Subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening. If you want to go deeper, you can join the Patreon at patreon.com/noirfrequency for early access, bonus material, and an ad-free feed. And if you want to carry the signal out into the world, visit noirfrequency.com for the store. Thank you for being here. Until next time, keep listening.